Hey everybody, welcome to Hidden Hustle. Jamie and Greg here. Special edition right now. Finally, as expected, unofficially official. Al Golden. They'll send out a press release in 3 weeks when he's all vetted. Even though they probably had all the time to vet in the world. But they wanted to make sure, and Notre Dame's going to cross the T's and dot the lowercase J's and all that, and make sure that they get everything in line so Al Golden can be the next defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Just came off obviously disappointing Super Bowl loss with the Cincinnati Bengals as the linebackers coach there. But did an outstanding job with the linebackers there. Everybody already kind of knows his background in terms of, long ago was the defensive coordinator at Virginia. He's a Penn State alum, was a tight end in college, was the head coach at Temple, resurrected a program that was easily the worst in college football, and then went to Miami. Things didn't go as well, but obviously there were some other circumstances that led to that. Just first of all, Greg, what are your overall thoughts on this hire?
So I think that when Freeman was choosing the defensive coordinator, right? Like I think everyone kind of looks at like a hire like that as a standalone. Like this is the defensive coordinator. Like what is his scheme? What are his ideas and all these other things? But I think given the fact that Marcus Freeman is the defensive guy, it's not. I don't view Golden as like I don't look at him as like, okay, what are his ideas and what are his plans and what are all the other stuff, because it's all going to be confined into Freeman's scheme, and I think that was pretty clear from the beginning. And so when the first names came out, right, of who it could be, I think when Al Golden was mentioned, people were like, well, I don't want it to be Al Golden, like, and even us, right? Like, I think, or I don't want to speak for you, but just for me, like, I thought Al Golden, like
He wasn't the top name on anyone's list. Yeah, we can say that.
you didn't think of it like that, but then you think about it and you think, well, wait a minute, like Freeman wants to be involved here, and he has his scheme that he wants the team to use, and the incoming coach has to adjust to our terminology and that sort of thing. And so then you look at it and you're like, okay, this person is going to team up with Freeman and they are going to run Freeman's defense. So that being the case, you look at Golden, elite linebacker coach, just on its own, right? If you brought him in just to coach linebackers, like that is a great coach to bring in. They have a young group. You're bringing in 4 freshmen. They're all on campus right now. Like that's big for them. You have Maris Leofau, who was supposed to play last year, didn't play. He has someone like Golden who's going to bring him up. He could take Bertrand to the next level. Someone like Jack Kaiser. So it's a great hire just for that group. Period. And then you factor in the fact that he was a head coach in college football, did a great job at Temple, like a really underrated, like great job at Temple. Like we talked about it in a previous pod where it's like that Temple program was UConn, and then they became a bowl team, right? Goes to Miami, and within a few months of him being there, the Shapiro scandal breaks. They come under sanctions. Like it was a big,
they were ineligible for a
problem.
bowl. They lost scholarships. Yeah.
Right. So that stuff doesn't, like, I don't really view it as a knock against him, right? It's not kind of anything, right? Like it's just a bad situation. So, and then obviously you go on to the NFL, and I don't want to overstate the Super Bowl thing, but I don't want to understate it either. It's not nothing. It's certainly like notable that he was a defensive coach on the team that played for the Super Bowl. And those linebackers, right? Like, other than Matt Freeman, who knows the names of the Cincinnati linebackers, right? And we just watched them play a football game, and there they are making plays, and the Rams can't run the ball. So I think given all of that, I think it's a good hire. He's teaming up with Freeman, good recruiter, known as a good recruiter everywhere he's been. So quality hire for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I think that the key, like you said, is that he's going to come in and um, it's not going to be his show. He has to adapt, and you want someone who is willing to adapt, and that's going to be important. But also someone who's going to bring in their own ideas and is going to be able to help in that way, because you don't want. It's not like that guy's going to be a puppet. He's not going to come in and just whatever Marcus Freeman says, this guy's doing. That's not. I don't see it as that distinction. It's just that he's not going to come in and make things harder for the players. And that's the main thing. And that was the Brian Van Gorder problem, right? Was this guy was like, it was so much information. When you're putting so much information out that only certain players can play in the scheme, that's a bad coach. That's doing a bad job of coaching. And also too, like that is not just for college football. That's a bad job for NFL too. Like you have to be able to so what Golden just experienced with the Bengals too is that he had all of his guys are on their first contract, means they're all young guys, right? So he's got second year and third year linebackers. Those are his starters, right? So those are guys that obviously have to develop under him, and guys that weren't first round picks, right? And they have to, be able to learn, and he's got to be able to simplify things to get these guys ready to play. And I want to shout out, because obviously I think a lot of Notre Dame fans probably read this article that came out just on Sunday, actually, and it's by Kyle Kelly, who's a grad student at Northwestern. And I don't know if this guy is like a Notre Dame fan or he just saw this as like a really cool angle to do, but he went there and went specifically to for Super Bowl Media Day and did a piece on, without, Golden wasn't talking about the Notre Dame job, and these guys weren't talking about specifically about the Notre Dame job, but he asked Von Bell about, who's a safety for them, but he, like Al Golden's influence with them, and he simplified the game for me in many ways. Like that's, I don't even know what more you want to hear, right? Or Sam Hubbard, who's obviously like an outside linebacker / he's an edge guy, really, right? But just like hardest working coaches on the staff, loves ball, loves his player, do anything to win. You see that every day in practice, right? Like, just Zach Taylor talking about how he develops the guys. Brilliant coach. Hubbard again, brilliant coach, great with relationship people. So obviously had experience recruiting. The sky's the limit. Like, I mean, really, and Mike Hilton, who was a guy that I'm super familiar with. I'm a Steelers fan. Great, blitzing nickel cornerback. Infectious, right? A lot of energy. Guy that hypes up the defense. Like, I mean, those are all really, really great things. That makes me more excited about the hire. Great job by Kelly on that piece that he did too. And and it shows that it's like when you're looking at a guy who was, a head coach in college and then in the pros, you think maybe this guy's maybe not can't relate to players, and you're worried about that kind of piece of it. But no, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. And it really seems like this guy was meant to be in college, really. Which and it's exciting. I'm excited to kind of see, what he does with like all those young linebackers, like you said. And I'm excited to, kind of see how he helps advance some of these guys.
Yeah, and you said it, like he made things simpler, right? And it helps that he came from a situation where he was coaching to someone else's defense, right? And he's making it simpler to someone else's scheme and someone else's defense. Like that's important because he is doing that with Notre Dame. Now he's going to be in charge of it, right? But when you coach the linebackers too, like everything else that's going on with the defense because they're so involved with everything else with the defense, right? So that just kind of like, to me, that's another like feather in the cap of he he just showed that he can take a defense that isn't his, make it digestible for the players, make it easy for the players, and then they go play, right? And we saw throughout the Super Bowl how many times like those linebackers were shooting gaps and they were on the runs and going back door that Chris Collinsworth was talking about all the time, like making plays in the run game and that sort of thing. And when you can do that with like not first round picks, right? So you look at the Rams and their defensive line, it's like great job, right? Well, you have Von Bell. I mean, not Von Bell.
Von Miller
Von Miller
and Aaron Donald, like
and Aaron Donald.
Those
like,
are generational
this is like Hall of Famers,
Hall
right?
of Famers, yeah.
Right, and you have Leonard Floyd too. Like, congratulations, right? There's another first round pick,
like another like top 5 or top 10 pick or whatever he was.
Right. So you're doing this with players who weren't first round picks, right? And so I think that, the infectious personality, right? It fits into the whole like Marcus Freeman kind of philosophy of, making things easier, making things digestible, making things fun, and then going out and playing, right? So you can play fast and play aggressive. And I'll bring up a question here from Timothy D. Is Golden known for blitzing linebackers?
Well, at Cincinnati, they didn't blitz a lot, right? They were not a heavy blitz team, not a heavy pressure team. On third downs, so a little bit like kind of what you would see with, I would say like what you saw from Clark Lee. Remember, he's not calling the plays, right? But at the same time, that's not what the defense, what they were asking them to do. So you didn't see those guys blitz too often. But like you said, they were playing like aggressive, like shooting gaps in terms of like making reads, right? Making reads and attacking downhill. So I don't know, like, I don't think you're going to see him. He's not also going to come in and be like, I'm going to, we're bringing the house every play. I don't see that. But I do imagine they're going to have like a lot of different like pressure packages and stuff that he will bring with him from his time working in Cincinnati and then the NFL, and add that into what Marcus Freeman is doing. And I'm excited to see that.
Right. And there was, and we've been talking, I guess, for the last 2 or 3 weeks about some of the coverages that Cincinnati employed. And I really hope he brings those over, because it's kind of an add-on to what Notre Dame already does. So the last 2 or 3 years, and even last year, we saw Kyle Hamilton in a robber position a lot from the safety position, from the safety spot. So they would be playing like a cover 2 look or a cover 3, and then Kyle would come inside and basically just be a robber in the middle of the field. Well, Cincinnati did this, but what they also did was they would do a tag off of the robber. So if you had like a crossing route or something like that, where let's say you had like trips to one side, and you would have like a double in route or a double post, what would happen is the slot corner or the inside corner would pass off that receiver to the robber would pick him up, and then that slot corner would become the robber. And that's the sort of thing that defenses or offenses like aren't really prepared for, right? Like, it's one thing to have the robber. It's like, oh, okay, I know who the robber is. It's like, I can identify him. I'll let him take this route, and then I'll throw it to the other in-breaking route. Well, when the robber changes, then that changes the read. And so that's something that I haven't seen Notre Dame do, and I think I would really love to see that, because it's just another wrinkle to where it's an add-on to something they are already doing. And that would, obviously enhance, what the defense is doing here. Let's throw this question up from Michael. It kind of gets into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is kind of overall. Also, how do you now view the Notre Dame staff as a whole as recruiters? How do you foresee recruiting taking the next step now and in the future to compete with Bama's and OSU's?
I mean, I think where you can already see, like, look at where Notre Dame is at in terms of where right now with just say, obviously you want to hold on to the Keon Keeleys and the Peyton Bowens or whatever, right? But you got to hold on to those guys. But look at who is trying to flip them, is that's the main thing. So that's what you're seeing the difference with Notre Dame in the type of guys that they are recruiting. And I, certainly Drake Bowen as well, right? Was also very, a national recruit, even though he's a local kid, was a national recruit. And you look at the kind of programs that were after him, right? Like, and they're going toe to toe for Sonny Styles with Ohio State and Brennan Vernon, Ohio State. Like that's who you're going against. So I think when you look at the staff as a whole as recruiters, I mean, you have to be able to see how the guys recruit to Notre Dame. I would say based on who they hired, the new hires, I think they've certainly upgraded overall on the staff in recruiting. But I think when you look at taking the next step, I think they've already kind of taken that next step where they're in there with those guys, and now it's holding on to them, do like being able to continue to win those battles, keep winning other battles. So I think all it is we see and IC's Matt Freeman has talked about this a lot. They're relentless and they have a plan, and it's just work ethic, and they're attacking it. And that's why Notre Dame is, in it with these guys that normally like they would like some guy not show them interest. They wouldn't even give them a shot really. And now they're like, I mean, they're taking their chances, right? They're taking their chances and it's paying off so far. And I mean, look at the start of the 2023 class already.
Yeah. Like I feel like the next step is in the process of being taken, right? They're on the way there. It's just like, this is what happens when you take the next step, right? You have, you recruit these guys like the Keon Keeleys of the world. It's like a 5-star defensive end. Like he's going to be like a top 10 player. That everyone's after him, right? So, and when we say everyone, like, okay, can we hold off Bama? Can we hold off Georgia? Like those are the guys, like you were saying. So, that's on the way. And I think that, how do you view the staff as a whole as recruiters? Like, I think what happens is you bring in everybody with the same mindset. You want everyone to have the same kind of thought of like, okay,
you don't want any passengers is the main thing.
We're waking up and we're recruiting. We're waking up and recruiting. Like, and that's where the head coach kind of leads the way, because he's waking up and recruiting, right? And it's just like a great player can elevate, their teammates. Well, this is where Marcus Freeman can elevate his staff as recruiters. You bring in like-minded people, but also like you set the tone and then you get after it. And you see it with the hires, right? Like Chancey Stuckey, right? Like everyone's talking about how he can be an electric recruiter. Jared Parker, right, was a recruiting coordinator. Al Washington, known as a fantastic recruiter. Golden, great recruiter, right? And then Mickens and O'Leary, like it's all kind of the same story with the staff. And so that I think is where it's like as a whole, like they're going to get after it and they're going to be very aggressive. We're going to switch gears a little bit, just to take all questions here from Fantasy Football Network. Do you think Notre Dame modernizes their offense?
I mean, I don't think that they are in like Stony. I'm not sure what the context of modernizing the offense is. Like, I think if you look at it, all you can say is that what Tommy Rees is doing is like he will modernize whatever to fit like the personnel. Like, so they weren't running like a ton of like RPO stuff. And that was something that you and I had talked about way much before you worked for IST. We had talked about privately, like play action, RPOs, like that is missing from the thing. Well, they went heavy into it late in the season. That became a big part of the offense. So they already kind of hit that part, in terms of the running game and all that, like what they're doing. We've talked about what they did with some of the two back stuff last week with 21 personnel and all that, and how they've done in terms of like motion and shifts. And I think Notre Dame is kind of already there in terms of modernizing the offense. It's just, part of what they have with Jack Cohn is that he's a throwback, if you will, type of quarterback because he's not a guy that you can use in the running game. So, I mean, the best way to modernize the offense from that perspective is to get a more mobile guy. Buckner is that guy. Certainly, Drew Bryan, you can do some of that stuff with too. And I think, that's really part of it. A lot of it comes down to the quarterback.
Yeah, and that kind of gets into the recruiting piece too. Like I Notre Dame isn't an, like, I don't know, unmodern offense, right? Like it's like you said, Reese calls the offense catered to the talents of the team. I think we all want to see an offense that is explosive, throwing the ball down the field, like challenging teams vertically more often, right? Like more of the RPO stuff. Well, you need to recruit those type of athletes then, right? And it's not that they don't have them, right? Like Lorenzo Styles, you can do that with. You can do that with Braden Lindsay. You can do that with Tobias Merriweather and Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas. Like that's not the problem. You need more players. You need more and more. Where, Ohio State's going to have 2 first-round receivers this year, and then they have Jackson Smith and Jengba going for 400 yards or whatever it is in the Rose Bowl, right? Like you want more on more on more. And you want someone like CJ Stroud playing quarterback, right? And CJ Stroud and Jack Cohn are just different kind of quarterbacks, right? So you're going to play different. Like Ohio State wouldn't have played that way if Jack Cohn was their quarterback, right? It would just gone a different way. So it's not that the offense isn't modern. It's just that they need more explosive players. And that will create the impression that, wow, Notre Dame's really modernized the offense. But it's more of just like they're just getting better players. So that's where I think the kind of where you're going to see that come from. I'm going to put up a comment from Marcus Kerr. Love the idea of Freeman and Golden putting their heads together to game plan on stopping the Buckeyes in week 1. And I think for me, that is a big part of why this is such a good hire, because it's Marcus Freeman and Al Golden, right? It's not just one. And I think when we talk about I think going from the NFL to college, everyone thinks about BBG, right? And how that didn't work out. And I think the main difference is that BBG, his scheme was not great for the college game, and B, it was his show and only his show. Brian Kelly was an offensive guy. He didn't poke his head in on that stuff, and he let him go. Golden and Freeman are going to be right. Yeah. Golden and Freeman are going to be working together. You have two defensive minds working on one thing. And I think in combination, that's what makes this hire as good as it can be.
Yeah, and I think here's the one thing you can say about Al Golden and what he's had to do working at Cincinnati, just within the division, right? So you look at who they play within the division. So they play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is a quarterback-driven offense where the quarterback is checking the play, getting them into the right play. That is that type of offense that they're having to deal with. So you're playing like chess on each play, really trying to against the quarterback. You're going against a heavy play action team, right? Heavy boot play action team in the Cleveland Browns, right? That's what you're going against there with the running games. They play a little bit heavier. That's who you're going against there. Playing against the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, that is as a college offense as you're going to see in the NFL, with the quarterback running game, the option game. Like that is very specifically like something that you would see in the college game, right? So he's not walking into a situation where, they didn't have those, specifically with that Lamar Jackson, there was no type of those offense when BBG was making the jump, right? So Golden has already kind of seen that and then had to deal with where now when you see the NFL game, you watch, there's a lot more like carryover where college offense has kind of spread into, no pun intended, but spread into the NFL schemes. And specifically with the quarterback position and the quarterback run game, where you never even, that was just not even, I can only imagine what it'd been like if like Randall Cunningham was asked to run some of these concepts back in the day. Like they didn't have that kind of stuff, right? So they have more stuff that you have to deal with now in the NFL, which is similar to what you would see in college. So because of that, that eases the transition greatly compared to what it would be for like an NFL coach. I'd say even like 5 years ago.
Right. Okay, I want to highlight a couple first-time listeners. Anthony K. Shea, thanks for coming in, bud. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, and then Jeff Howard too. And like while you guys are while you're here, first-time listeners, we're happy to have you guys. We're going to be doing this more often. Click the subscribe button. If you enjoy it, click the like button. You don't want to miss any of the shows. You don't want to miss any of our, things coming out. We usually record on Wednesdays. We got lucky here on, we had some availability on a Tuesday when news broke. So we popped in live, but normally we're going to be doing Wednesdays, and Fridays too. So keep tuned in with us. We're going to be doing this throughout the off season. Spring ball starts up. It's going to be really fun. I think, Jamie, we can transition a bit to kind of the staff as a whole, to where, it looks like they're going to have, this is the staff is set, right? Like it looks like Tommy Rees has, we still have to fade maybe some NFL teams, some NFL interest on him. But if things go to plan, and he sticks with the staff, you have Marcus Freeman as the head coach, Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, Dylan McCullough with running backs, Chancey Stuckey with wide receivers, Jared Parker, tight ends, Harry Heastand, offensive line, Al Washington, defensive line, Al Golden, DC, linebackers, Mike Mickens with the corners, and then Chris O'Leary with the safeties. So just kind of,
Brian Mason. Brian Mason.
Yeah, Brian Mason. Yeah, with the special teams. So let's just kind of take a overhead, like of the whole group. Marcus Freeman's first full staff. Like, what is your impression of that group there?
I mean, I really like the staff. I like how I certainly I don't think it's good that they lost Lance Taylor and McNulty. I would have loved if those guys would have returned, because I think they had obviously shown great chemistry with Tommy Rees and kind of what they've done there. Also, both guys good recruiters and obviously good coaches. That's why they've got promoted to offensive coordinator roles. So it sucks to lose those guys. At the same time, I think if you're going to trade a running back coach and you end up getting Dylan McCullough, I think you end up pretty well there. I like how Parker obviously is someone who has worked with Freeman before and, has it like another play calling background too. So he can, be another sounding board for Tommy Rees. I think, if you look at, say, like Mason, Washington, Mickens, O'Leary, because he's worked with Freeman last year too, but they're, and then you throw in Parker and stuff. These guys they have worked together either at Cincinnati or have worked with Freeman before. And I think that's important because you want to have guys you can trust, right? And even though like it's great to have, get the band back together, bring all the guys back, as many as you can, but you have to have a certain amount of trust there, with the head guy, the boss, right? So I think that's important. And I think the main thing, and then I think at offensive line too, I think, you upgrade with Harry Heastand, whether it's, I think short term you upgrade, long term we're going to have to see what happens. But, I really like the makeup of the staff, and I think it has a chance to be really, really good. The one thing with college football staffs is it can look good right now, and then a year from now, 3 of those guys could be gone, just because that's how the game works. Look at, like, you thought the staff was going to be together a month ago. It looked a lot different than it looks now, right? So that's just how it is. But I mean, I like the composition of the staff, and certainly on paper, right? Obviously they haven't played yet, and we got to see how they recruit over these next few months during spring ball and when they're getting guys on campus. But on paper, I think it's a really, really good staff.
Yeah, and I think, you kind of touched on all of a lot of the reasons why I think the staff is good, and the big question to me is I think where Brian Kelly what consistently fell short a little bit is when it's not that they never played well in big games. Like, they won a bunch of big games when he was the head coach, but there were some games where it's like they got blown out a lot. Just when they lost, a lot of the time it was a blowout. They didn't lose frequently, of course, but you look at the Clemson game in 2018, right? You look at the Miami game in 2017. You got blown out in that one. You look at the Michigan game in 2019. I mean, we don't have to go over all the blowouts, but the point is that in big games, they weren't always ready to play their best game. And that is where Freeman and this staff needs to take the next step. It's like going up against Ohio State, like, you're going to get tested right away. It's one thing to win, but and also lose. But at the same time, like, what kind of performance did you put forward? Like, did you put your best foot forward, right? Because sometimes you put your best foot forward and you lose. Like, that's just the way it goes. Like, for a perfect example is the 2014 FSU game, right? No one leaves that game feeling bad about Notre Dame. You feel bad about the outcome. You feel bad about the fact that, there was some shenanigans at the end of the game.
Yeah.
With
2017 Georgia, these kind of games where
exactly.
You're like,
2019 Georgia, like, you don't feel bad. Like, you
feel like they gained confidence from those games. Yeah.
Right. You put your best foot forward and you didn't win, and that's the way it goes. But too many times you feel like it was a big game and they just didn't come. Right. And I think that's where people get frustrated by, the Rose Bowl in 2020 and the ACC title game in 2020. Right. Like, you don't always win, but you want them to be playing at their highest level. Right. Be ready to play your best game. And I think that's where this staff is going to be measured, beyond even like the wins and losses, right? Like, you need to maintain the fact that you're winning the games that you should win. And then they need to start playing better, as in these bigger games. Let's get to more questions here. Andrew Benson with Al Golden being, I believe, the only coach on the staff with head coaching experience. How much do you think that will help Marcus being a first-time head coach?
I mean, I think it's going to help a lot, right? Yeah. Because I just think you want to have a sounding board for certain things. And there's always going to be things, and obviously Al Golden hasn't, been a head coach at Notre Dame, but there's always going to be things that come up that, he's never had to deal with before because he's never had to make those decisions. And that's like a lot of the stuff that he's had to deal with so far, right? Yeah. Has been stuff that he, every little obstacle, you're like, man, I didn't even know I had to worry about that. And now you have someone who did have to worry about those kind of things. And especially like, when it comes down to it, obviously Marcus Freeman's got to be able to make the decisions, but like to have someone to kind of lean on when it comes to like things like, not to get in the negative aspect, but disciplinary decisions and deciding like, I mean, what should we do? This guy's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, like that kind of thing. Like, if you're a first-time head coach and there's no one else around there that has had to deal with that kind of stuff or never thought about it, or always is going to be like, it's my position, guy. So, we got to do this. You want someone with that kind of perspective that can give you, that. And he's had a lot of experience doing that. So I think it is really valuable.
I agree. It was like, honestly, it's interesting contrast to someone like Haycock, who they offered the job earlier, didn't take it. And I think outside of someone like Haycock, who's kind of run his own defense for 20 plus years or whatever, if you're not going to have that, then have someone like Golden who has been a head coach who can help Freeman with things like the little things that he doesn't know about,
Yeah.
right? The things that he can't prepare for, that he hasn't, thought about or can't anticipate or that sort of thing, because they're going to come up, and that someone like Golden can help, in that area, because it takes a lot off the plate of Freeman, or it's a good sounding board for him to just be like, throw something off of him and say like, hey, how should I deal with this? Or something Golden can say like, hey, just be ready for this coming up, right? Be prepared for this thing that's going to come up. And shoot, even how to like handle press conferences, right? Like something happens in the game that's frustrating, or something that happens, it's like Golden could just kind of pull him aside and say, hey, like, okay, this is what's going to come, these are the questions you're going to get, like, be ready for that. And then move forward, or this is how you can handle the team in this situation, right? So I think it's going to be a good situation there, and I
Um,
think it's a great point.
yeah, and just one other thing I want to bring up, because I remember we talked about that interview he did with, I think, Dave Lapham
Yeah,
or whatever, right?
yeah.
And there's one specific piece in there that he talked about, where he talked about having like a menu ready for a game, like in terms of like what you want, like scheme wise, what you need going into a game, going against opponent, and like not having too much on the menu, but making sure you have enough to deal with all these different things. And to me, like that was a perfect example of like, I mean, Mike Elston did not have a menu that he was like, I don't know where to go to on this menu, like that in that Oklahoma State game. And that's one of
Mm,
the reasons why that game fell apart defensively for Notre Dame. And then Marcus Freeman eventually had to be like, man, I got to take the reins here. Like, so to be able to do that and go into the game, to know a guy who has that kind of experience, and obviously this isn't a head coaching thing, but it's more of a defensive coordinator thing, but like to know that like, hey, we have to have this amount of stuff on the menu to go against in this game to be able to combat this. And a guy who has the kind of experience where he's like, oh, we have to pull from this thing that maybe wasn't originally on our menu, whatever. That is so
mhm.
valuable too. So that's why, another reason why, like, just the fact that he's thinking that way, and that's the way he thinks, to me is like, that is just exactly what Marcus Freeman needs, because he's got to deal with all these other things in addition to what's going on in the defense. So you need somebody else who's like, because you know Marcus Freeman might be thinking about, man, I gotta, like, what are we gonna do? Um, you know, no, he can't be worried all about like how are we going to stop these guys when all of a sudden it's 4th and 3 at the 37-yard line, and he has to make a decision about going for it, what play to call, whatever, all that kind of stuff. So he needs somebody else he can rely on, and that just shows me too that Al Golden is that kind of guy who thinks that way and is always going to have something prepared.
Yep, it's a good point. Next up is Esteban R. Question: what ideas besides the Robert one Greg mentioned would you like to see Golden bring to the Irish defense?
Um, okay, so one of the things that Cincinnati does, and most of the NFL does, right? Because based on personnel wise, it's a very like 11 personnel heavy league, right? So, 3 receivers on the field. So on defense, it's a very nickel league, right? It's a very nickel league. Basically, Cincinnati, even though they're like a 3-4 technically a defense, they're kind of like in a 4-2-5, essentially, like about 70% of the time, which is pretty standard for the NFL. So I want to see what he can bring from that perspective in terms of like playing some of their sub package stuff and how Notre Dame's going to handle that. That's what I'm really interested to see what he can kind of bring from there. And also, um, I read this piece about when they played Baltimore this year and how they kind of handled that and what they changed specifically game plan wise for that game, and how they played more of like a standard 4-3, even some 4-4 looks in that game. So I think more, not, that's not like bigger picture kind of things, but that's more of like game plan specific. That's the kind of stuff that I want to know of, like what Golden will kind of bring to the table when they did that, and some of the stuff like what Notre Dame did last year against Wisconsin, where they played like heavy 4-4 for most of the game, which I thought was obviously was a great thing. That's something that Clark Lee did a fantastic job of when, they're playing, all of a sudden they're playing like basically like a 5-3 look against Virginia Tech in 2019 and things like that. Like, so that kind of game plan specific stuff, that's what I'm kind of excited to see. What ideas, like what specifically he's going to bring. I don't know specifically, but I think it's going to come a lot of that, some of that game to game plan stuff and nickel.
Yeah, and I think it used to be that college and the pros were doing basically separate things. So you bring someone from the pros, and it's like, well, it's a different style of football at that level. But now the college game, the pros are bringing so much now from the college game offensively that it's almost like a good symbiotic kind of like marriage where it's like they're just taking college concepts and applying them to the pro game. And so for Golden to then be able to come back to college and say like, hey, this is what, someone like Ohio State is doing, or like Lincoln Riley is doing, right? Like this is what we're seeing in the pros. This is how the pros are dealing with those problems, and then giving those offenses problems where like maybe college defenses aren't as, kind of adapt at, stopping those types of offenses. So giving like a different kind of, I guess, set of eyes on that and how to combat the problems that we've seen there. I think that's like kind of going to be an invaluable thing, right? Because you're coming from a different level. Like the guy is having to deal with like Lamar Jackson and, Baker Mayfield with the Browns and that sort of thing, right? So, Sean McVay, right, who is like basically a cutting edge, play caller, Pat Mahomes, that sort of thing. Like you're game planning to stop Pat Mahomes and what the Chiefs are doing, right? So it's easy to see. It's like, oh, okay, like now we can come up with something to stop, Ohio State, where it's like it's outside of the base of what Notre Dame is doing. That's a little bit more game specific, and I think that's an area where, Notre Dame can kind of take the next step defensively. Just put up a comment from Jason Warnock, like, funny how not getting Heacock was a blessing. I don't view it as a blessing. Like, to me, it's almost like losing Taylor and
getting McCullough, yeah,
and getting McCullough, right, or McNulty. Like, you take a situation that maybe you didn't want, right? Like Notre Dame offered him the job, right? So it's not like they didn't want him to do it. It's that you take a situation and you make the best of it, right? Okay, this situation didn't work out. Now we're going to adjust and try to make the best decision from here, right? So, okay, we're not going to get the guy who called his own defense at a high level for 20 years. Okay, let's get someone who then was a head coach and who has coached, is an elite linebacker coach, and is a great recruiter, and is coaching in the Super Bowl, right? And is willing to, and knows how to adapt his philosophies to the defense that is already in place, right? So you just take a situation and you make the best of it. And I think that's what they did. It's not that they're better off. It's just that I think Marcus Freeman made the best choice from, where to go after Heacock decided to stay with Iowa State.
And I think with the way you kind of look at it with like what happened with Clark Lee, right? And so if Clark Lee had stayed for another year and that Vandy job didn't open up and it wasn't his alma mater,
yeah,
I mean, I think he probably would have been the head coach at Notre Dame, right? Which could have been a great thing. Could have, right? Certainly he's a heck of a defensive coordinator, certainly a guy who would represent the university well, all of that. Don't judge him based on the situation he took over at Vandy. You have to judge him long-term in there because it's, obviously a very much a rebuilding situation. But I mean, I think Notre Dame fans saw as soon as Marcus Freeman came on, they were like, maybe is he the exact same level of tactician that Clark Lee is? Maybe not, but he is like 10 times the recruiter he was. And I think most people know that Notre Dame recruiting is going to be what gets them into the thing, not having um, just like a really good person and a really good defensive coach. That's not going to be the recipe for them to do that. That isn't enough of a recipe to get there. Talent is one of the main things. So it wasn't like a blessing in disguise. I don't want to say that Marcus Freeman ended up there, but I think it worked out well, and it worked out the way it was supposed to for Notre Dame there.
Yeah, it like things always go, how they go, right? You take information and you just adjust and you keep going. So that's what they did. I think it could have worked with Haycock, but he wasn't the guy because he chose not to, right? Like if it was supposed to work out, it would have worked out. And it didn't because he wasn't the fit, right? And so Al Golden's going to be the fit, or at least they hope so, right?
Yeah.
All right, so it looks like that's it for questions. Jamie,
All right.
you want to end it?
Okay, so any like kind of final thoughts on kind of what you're hoping for from Golden? Let's not even talk about this season, but just like let's talk about what you're hoping for from Golden this spring, and what we hear about the defense. What do you want to hear about the defense this spring? What do you want to hear about recruiting? I mean, they're doing pretty well. I think would have been okay even if they didn't get Al Golden recruiting defensive wise. But what do you want to hear this spring? Defense recruiting, etc. In regards to Notre Dame adding Al Golden.
Okay. The defense, I would say, just how are the young linebackers taking to this, right? Because they're a pretty important piece to not just this year, but to Notre Dame's future, right? Like you have so many young guys with Jalen Sneed and Josh Burnham, Junior Tulialamaka, and Nolan Ziegler, right? Like, so you have those guys. They're all on campus right now. You want them to start like vibing with him, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, okay, like they're picking up what he's got going on. What can he do for Marist? What can he do for Prince Collie, right? Like, what can he do for Batelho? Like, what does he have in store for Batelho? Like, that is a huge question for me.
Yeah.
Because you have this talented player who, where is he going to be? Like, no one really knows, right? And I feel like if you're not getting more, like a lot more out of him, then you're kind of like, it's a waste, like because he's so talented, right? So that's what I kind of want to hear about. As far as recruiting, like where is he making a difference? Not at linebacker, right? Because linebacker is pretty much set, right? They have their guys, but like, where are you on the defensive line? Where are you?
You want to hear him connecting with these other players, defense all around.
I want to hear him connecting with like Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen and the current commits, right? Like, how is he vibing with those guys? Because they are vital.
You want to hear guys talking about how I'm excited to play in Coach Golden's defense. Yeah.
Right. Like the corners, the safeties, right? They're still after Caleb Downs, right? They're still going after Christian Gray and Malik Muhammad, guys like that. So like, where is he with those guys? Because that's when Notre Dame really takes a leap. Like, you make a move on Caleb Downs or Christian Gray and Malik Muhammad, you make a move on those guys, like now you're really cooking with fire. Like now it's like a really big, really good situation.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head on both those things, because that's what I want to hear in terms of his like overall impact. I was thinking, just the total thing, but that's exactly like Keon Keeley. I want to hear from like Keon Keeley. I just talked to Coach Golden. I'm excited, whatever. That's the kind of thing you want to hear, before it, because he has to be able to connect with those guys. And that's something that I think is crucial. I think it's absolutely crucial. It's adding another guy to the mix, and that's Notre Dame's like tag teaming all these guys. We hear about the Rodney Gallagher's got like 5 coaches recruiting him. Well, I want to hear Golden. He's just like, I'm coming in over the top with all these guys. That's what you're hearing about. That's definitely want to hear. And like you said, for me, it's less about obviously in the spring specifically. It's not about scheme, the spring, whatever. I want to hear about player development, and I want to hear those linebackers you said. I think Cully and Leopold, those are exactly, and Botello, where he kind of sees that, how he evaluates the current group, and I want to hear someone like make a jump, and that's like him connecting with these guys and do that. And I mean, everything we've heard from it, right? And Clay Kareem just came out and was just like, this guy's the right guy for the job. Obviously, he played with Cincinnati Bengals this year, so I'm excited to kind of see how that all works out and how he connects with these guys. Um, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Thanks everyone for the great questions. Thanks for
Yeah, on
those.
short notice. It was really
Yeah,
fun.
for sure. And thanks for the first time people. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that. Once again, like Greg said, subscribe to Irish Sports Daily's YouTube channel. Usually we do go live on Wednesdays. I don't know, we won't go live Wednesdays because this was kind of like would have
Yeah.
been our Wednesday thing. But we'll probably come back later in the week on a Friday and do something there for you. Maybe get more into Golden, or I mean, we'll see what happens during the week. It is Notre Dame football. There always something pops up out of nowhere. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.